the stuffed bear below him. He put his thumb into his mouth again, and again whined, and looked at the birds and hated them, and hated the voices in the kitchen behind him. For now he understood that they were no longer discussing him, and this was outrageous. For there was nothing in the world as valuable and as precious as himself. Nothing significant lived in the world besides him, and the world was made to serve him, to wait upon his smiles, to stand beside his bed, to put delicious morsels into his mouth, to amuse him, to cry and laugh over him, to clap hands delightedly at his exploits, to turn in his direction adoring faces and worn, worshipping simpers. Dimly, as he tore viciously at the grass, he was tearing viciously at her, and destroying her, who dared not to bend with supple waist and knee before him, and acknowledge him for the mighty creature he was. Cathy Saint, who preferred to be known as Catherine, delicately tasted the chicken broth she was preparing for her son. The fine skin between her eyes puckered, and she shook her head. "I'm afraid it is a wee bit too salty," she said to her sister Alice, whom she preferred to call Alicia. For Cathy Saint was precious, and had a sweet predatory face and what her sister Alice sometimes thought of as a dainty shark's smile. Cathy loved people. She was lyrical about people. "More and more and more people," she would sing to Alice and her husband, lifting her skirts and sailing about any room in which she happened to be. "How can anyone live without people?" And her eyes would shine with what she believed was innocent joy in life and her fellow-men. Her love for people did not extend to the cleaning women she employed, who never remained with her for more than 1 or 2 days, or the maids she hired, who left within a week, bag and baggage, or the tradesmen with whom she dealt, or the gardeners her husband had coaxed to work for the family. Among these people, she had a reputation for greed, merciless exploitation, arrogance, what they designated slave-driving. She was a pretty woman of 35. No one but Alice knew her age. Her husband, Mark Saint, believed her to be nearer his own age, which was 32. She would soon celebrate her 30th birthday, as she called it, and Alice was visiting her today to discover, in her forthright manner, what Cathy wanted for the occasion. Alice did not often come to this house, for a number of reasons, among them a reason so hurting and so full of anguish that she could scarcely endure it, and which no one guessed. For she was in love with Mark Saint, and had loved him from the moment she had met him 10 years ago, when she was only 8, and he was engrossed with Cathy. He had married Cathy a year later. He had just been graduated from his school of engineering, and he was 23, and Cathy was 26, according to her birth certificate, but only 21, according to her own statement. Her parents were alive then, and entered into the deception with her, for they wished her to marry Mark, who was not only in a profession, but had inherited considerable money from his parents, who had died in an automobile accident when he was 15. Cathy's parents owned a small but fairly prosperous little hardware store in the city, and they were awed by the handsome Mark Saint. They adored their older daughter, and had left her the bulk of their savings, $15,000, the guardianship of Alice, their house, and their shop. Alice inherited only $3,000. No one thought this unjust, except Alice, and Alice was a child who kept her own counsel and had a wise and cynical inner eye. Cathy was considered very charming and even lovely by those she had deceived into believing her the gentlest, sweetest, most innocent, and most loving of women, and these, strangely enough to Alice, were legion. She was of medium height, and gave the impression of slenderness, for her breasts were small, her shoulders narrow and thin, her arms only barely plump, her waist nearly slim. But her belly and her buttocks and her legs were thick and heavy. The first two she restrained with elastic and steel, the latter she hid in buoyant skirts which swished in a very feminine fashion just below the curve of her gross calf. Because of the constant hurly-burly of her skirts, and this was pure art, none of her friends noticed the expanse of her peasant ankles, nor the breadth of her large feet. It had been quite a shock to Mark to discover on his wedding night that his bride, after shedding the artful bouffant gown and petticoats, had the lower body and limbs of a very sturdy and lustful peasant, made for the plough and the field, the chum and the barn. It had taken him several shocked moments to force back his concentration upon Cathy's pale and luminous face, so daintily shaped, so sweet in expression, so